Welcome back to Real Crime Stories, the podcast where we bring you crime stories from around the world. In today's story, a body was discovered burning by the roadside, charred beyond recognition. There was no name, no past, no trace of who she had been. Her face was destroyed, her ears were gone, her fingers and toes had been deliberately cut away. Every mark of identity had been stripped from her, as if someone had tried to erase her from existence entirely. But in forensic science, the dead always speak. Every wound is a clue. Every scar tells a story. And in this case, the remains of a young woman would become the only key to uncovering the truth and exposing a killer. Stonington, Connecticut, is the kind of town that feels frozen in time. Rolling hills stretch across the countryside, forests line narrow roads, and isolated hamlets sit quietly in the darkness. At night, those roads become especially desolate, winding through farmland and thick woods with little light to guide the way. It was on one of those roads that a passerby noticed something unusual. In the distance, flames flickered against the night sky. At first, it appeared to be a brush fire. The driver pulled over and called 911, just as a local fire chief happened to arrive. Together, they moved quickly to extinguish the blaze. But as the fire chief aimed his extinguisher, he realized with horror what he was actually seeing: a human body. He immediately adjusted his approach, carefully suppressing the flames without damaging potential evidence. The area was sealed off, and Connecticut state troopers closed the road, documenting every angle, every object, every detail surrounding the remains. The body had been wrapped in layers of plastic, blankets, and duct tape. This was not where the woman had died. It was a dump site. Whoever left her there wanted her to vanish, unrecognizable and forgotten. The state medical examiner was called in, a seasoned forensic pathologist with decades of experience and thousands of autopsies behind him. Even he knew this case would test every skill he had. The body was transported intact, still wrapped, and each layer was removed slowly to preserve any trace evidence. The victim was a young woman, likely in her 20s. Her faces had been destroyed, and parts of her body had been deliberately removed. To investigators, the message was unmistakable. Someone had gone to extreme lengths to hide who she was. Without fingers, fingerprints were useless. Without toes, even the smallest identifying details, rings, scars, tattoos, could be erased. Yet, despite the brutality, the body still told a story. The burns on her front were far more severe than those on her back, suggesting she had been lying face up when the fire was set. The ground had shielded parts of her lower back, preserving small patches of skin. In one area, the skin hadn't burned away at all. It had been cut. Detectives immediately suspected a tattoo had once been there. Tattoos are deeply personal markers of identity, and removing one suggested the killer knew exactly how investigators would try to identify her. Police searched missing persons databases across Connecticut, but found nothing. When they expanded their search, a lead finally emerged on Long Island, New York, nearly 80 miles away. The missing woman was Rebecca Koster. She lived with her parents and worked as a nursing assistant, caring for developmentally disabled adults. Her father reported her missing after her employer called to say she hadn't shown up for work, something completely out of character for her. Rebecca went out with friends the night before. By around 3:30 a.m., she seemed fine. After that, she vanished. Flyers were distributed with her photo and personal details, including one distinctive feature, a large butterfly tattoo on her lower back. When Connecticut detectives learned of Rebecca's disappearance, the similarities were impossible to ignore, though the distance gave them pause. Could the burned body found along a rural road really belong to her? During the autopsy, the medical examiner found the killer's fatal mistake. While much of Rebecca's body had been mutilated to conceal her identity, her teeth remained intact, and unlike fingerprints, dental records don't burn away easily.
Dental records provide an ironclad method of identification. With assistance from Long Island police, Rebecca's records were obtained and compared. The result was undeniable. The Jane Doe found burned on a Connecticut roadside was Rebecca Koster. What came next was the hardest task of all. Detectives now had to deliver news no parent should ever hear. They went to the Koster home, where Rebecca's parents were waiting. The words landed with devastating weight. Rebecca had been murdered. Her mother later described running outside, screaming into the night, unable to process that someone had taken her daughter's life. For investigators, the case now carried new urgency. Who would kill such a vibrant young woman, and why? To find answers, they began reconstructing Rebecca's final hours, starting with those closest to her. Rebecca was remembered as bubbly and full of life. She shared a close bond with her mother, even following her into the same profession as a nursing assistant. On the night Rebecca disappeared, her mother, Barbara, was working the overnight shift. The last time she saw her daughter, Rebecca was teasing her brother over French fries before heading out with her best friend, Nicole, and her new boyfriend, Dan. Rebecca and Dan had only recently begun dating. It wasn't serious, but in any missing person case, investigators must examine the people closest to the victim. Nicole told Rebecca's mother that she had left the group earlier, leaving Rebecca behind with Dan and a few other friends. Dan was quickly brought in for questioning. He told detectives he had walked Rebecca to her door around 3:30 a.m. and watched her go inside safely. According to him, that was the last time he saw her. He insisted he cared deeply for Rebecca and would never hurt her. To assess his credibility, investigators suggested a polygraph. Dan agreed. The questions focused on whether he knew what had happened to Rebecca or where she might be. When the results came back, they suggested deception. Still, detectives were cautious. Polygraphs are not foolproof. Despite the troubling results, Dan continued to cooperate fully. His home was searched thoroughly, but nothing connected him to Rebecca's disappearance or death. For now, suspicion lingered, but there was no evidence to move forward. Investigators painstakingly verified every account from that night. One by one, they compared statements from Dan and the friends who'd been with Rebecca. Every timeline matched, no inconsistencies, no obvious lies. With no clear suspect, detectives were forced to widen the search. They turned back to the medical examiner, hoping the autopsy could narrow the timeline of Rebecca's death. Toxicology tests showed no alcohol or drugs in her system. That meant any alcohol she may have consumed earlier had already been metabolized. In other words, Rebecca had been alive for some time after leaving the bar. The medical examiner estimated her time of death at roughly 4 hours after she was last seen at 3:30 a.m., though he emphasized it was only an approximation. Time of death is an inexact science, influenced by countless variables. Still, the estimate gave investigators a crucial lead. If Rebecca were alive after Dan left her, with whom would she have been with? Her family accessed her phone records online. 2 calls immediately stood out, both from the same unfamiliar number, beginning with 617. The first call, placed at 4:10 a.m., lasted 15 minutes. The second, at 4:27 a.m., lasted just 20 seconds. The timing was chilling. Whoever made those calls was likely the last person to speak with Rebecca. For her mother, the realization was devastating. Rebecca had always believed she was safe, that no one would ever hurt her. But, as her mother would later reflect, predators don't always look like monsters. Detectives moved quickly to trace the mysterious number. In the modern world, every cell phone leaves a footprint. Calls bounce from tower to tower, allowing investigators to track a phone's movement. The data revealed the caller was traveling west to east that morning, directly towards Rebecca's home. The first call was long, the second was brief, as if signaling arrival. Investigators believed the caller was outside Rebecca's home when that final call was made. But there was a problem. The 617 number wasn't registered to anyone. It didn't appear in any database. It was a prepaid burner phone, a dead end. As detectives pursued the elusive caller, the medical examiner continued his work. One crucial question remained. Was Rebecca alive when she was set on fire? To find the answer, he searched for soot in her lungs.
If Rebecca had inhaled smoke, it would have meant she was still breathing when the fire was set. She hadn't. There was no soot in her lungs. Rebecca was already dead before the flames. The burns had destroyed much of the surface evidence, forcing the medical examiner to look deeper. He examined every organ. Inside the abdominal cavity, he found a stab wound to the liver and a large amount of clotted blood. That injury alone could have been fatal, but there was more. Rebecca had 4 sharp force wounds to her neck. Because of the fire damage, it was difficult to determine whether those injuries occurred before or after death. Still, the doctor suspected that at least one had been inflicted while she was alive. He knew that when a vein in the neck is cut, air can be drawn into the bloodstream, causing an air embolism, a sudden rush of air to the heart that can stop it almost instantly. To confirm his theory, he ordered X-rays. The images revealed a telltale air-blood level in the heart. It was the proof he needed. Rebecca had been stabbed in the neck while still alive. The embolism had stopped her heart. Combined with the stab wound to the liver, there was no doubt. She had been murdered by multiple sharp force injuries before her body was burned. With the official cause of death ruled a homicide, detectives returned to their timeline. They retraced Rebecca's final night, focusing on the last place she had been seen alive, the bar. There, they uncovered the next crucial piece of evidence, a full surveillance system that had captured the night in detail. The footage gave investigators their first real break. Rebecca was clearly visible, sitting slightly apart from her friends, while her boyfriend and others mingled nearby. Then a man appeared. He didn't fit the scene. He looked older, dressed in a conservative sweater vest, with nothing outwardly threatening about him. But his approach was direct and deliberate. He entered Rebecca's personal space and struck up a conversation. For several minutes they sat side by side. Both were seen using their phones. At one point, the man appeared to take Rebecca's phone, pressing in numbers as if entering his contact information himself. Armed with this new lead, detectives re-interviewed Rebecca's friends. One of them, Jennifer, now remembered something that hadn't seemed important at the time. She recalled the man clearly, his persistence, his pushy behavior, the way he made her uncomfortable. She described him as creepy, especially the questions he asked. Jennifer said he had done the same thing to her. He took her phone and entered his own number, saving it under the name J. Brown. Computer crime specialists examined her phone. There it was, J. Brown, linked to the same mysterious 617 number that had called Rebecca just minutes before she vanished. For detectives, it was a breakthrough. They finally had a name, even if it was only an alias, directly tied to both the bar encounter and Rebecca's final phone records. Then another lead arrived, this one from the Connecticut Crime Lab. Investigators had submitted the duct tape found wrapped around Rebecca's body. Despite the fire damage, latent print examiners managed to lift 2 thumbprints from the adhesive side, an extremely rare find. The prints were run through the state database. Within hours, there was a match. Both belonged to a man named Evans Gantier. Now, detectives had 2 suspects, J. Brown, the man from the bar, and Evans Gantier, whose fingerprints were literally on the tape binding Rebecca's body. It didn't take long to realize they were the same person. J. Brown wasn't real. It was an alias. Behind it was Evans Gantier.
As investigators dug into his background, a disturbing pattern emerged. While Gantier didn't have an extensive violent criminal history, there were troubling incidents, domestic disputes with his girlfriend, allegations that he had been pimping her out, and reports that he had photographed women inside his garage. Detectives showed Jennifer a photo lineup. Without hesitation, she identified Evans Gantier as the man from the bar, the same man who had entered his number into her phone under the name J. Brown. It was the confirmation investigators needed.
The focus now shifted to finding him. Surveillance teams traced leads to the Bronx, where Ganthier's girlfriend lived. His SUV, a vehicle police already knew from prior traffic stops, was spotted parked near her residence. The next day, investigators watched as Ganthier walked straight to the SUV. The moment he got inside, officers moved in. He was taken into custody without incident. At headquarters, detectives began questioning him. Ganthier consented to searches of both his vehicle and his residence, insisting there was nothing to find. He denied any involvement in Rebecca's murder, but detectives pressed forward. They weren't relying on words, they were looking for proof. When investigators searched Ganthier's garage, several things immediately raised concern. Cleaning supplies, rollers, brushes, a broom, cement cleaner, fresh paint. The floor showed signs of being scrubbed and repainted, as if someone had tried to erase what had once been there. Still, nothing directly tied the garage to Rebecca. The real breakthrough came with the SUV. Investigators discovered red stains on the center console and deep in the narrow crevices beside the driver's seat. Blood had pooled in an area that could only be reached if someone had been bleeding heavily inside the vehicle. DNA testing confirmed the truth. It was Rebecca's blood. Confronted with the evidence, Ganthier did not confess. Instead, he told an elaborate story. He admitted meeting Rebecca at the bar and calling her afterward, claiming she had gone with him willingly. He said she suddenly became ill, foamed at the mouth, and lost her balance. According to him, she tripped over dumbbells in his garage, hit her head, and began bleeding. He claimed he panicked, placed her in his SUV, and tried to drive her to a hospital. By his account, she died on the way. From there, his story grew darker. Ganthier admitted mutilating her body, cutting off her fingers and toes, carving away her tattoo, actions he said were meant to make her resemble a missing person. He described wrapping her body, taking it across the Port Jefferson ferry to Connecticut, and setting it on fire after dousing it with gasoline. He acknowledged burning her remains, but insisted he had never killed her. According to him, her death was an accident. Detectives weren't buying it. Panic does not explain calculated mutilation. Seasoned investigators know that when killers are caught, they often try to minimize their actions. Ganthier's version of events was an attempt to transform murder into misfortune. The case would come down to science. If his story was going to collapse, it would be through the medical examiner's findings, and it did. There was no skull fracture, no bleeding inside the brain, no injuries consistent with a fall. Instead, there were stab wounds, one to the liver causing massive internal bleeding and multiple wounds to the neck. X-rays revealed an air embolism in the heart, proving Rebecca was alive when at least one of those neck wounds was inflicted. These findings dismantled Ganthier's defense completely. Rebecca had not died in an accident. She had been murdered. Prosecutors charged him with second-degree murder. At trial, Ganthier continued to deny responsibility, portraying himself as a victim of circumstance. But the evidence told a different story. Rebecca's blood in his vehicle, his fingerprints on the duct tape, the autopsy results. His claim that she never bled in the front seat was directly contradicted by physical evidence. Piece by piece, his story unraveled. The trial lasted 4 weeks.
Rebecca's mother attended every day, her grief visible, her resolve unbroken. She had promised herself she would see justice done. After just 5.5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned their verdict: guilty of murder. The courtroom fell silent. For the Koster family, it wasn't joy, it was closure, an acknowledgement that Rebecca's life mattered, and that the man who destroyed it would never walk free again. Evans Ganthier was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. The judge condemned not only the murder, but the calculated attempt to erase Rebecca's identity. For investigators and prosecutors, the case stood as a testament to persistence and forensic science. Without fingerprints, DNA, and expert pathology, Rebecca might have remained a Jane Doe. Instead, her killer was held accountable. For her family, the verdict was bittersweet. Justice had been served, but Rebecca was gone. As her mother said, no conviction could bring her back. Forgiveness was impossible. What remained was the knowledge that no one else would suffer at Ganthier's hands, and that Rebecca's voice, silenced by violence, had finally been heard. Thank you for watching Real Crime Stories. If you're drawn to mysteries from around the world, subscribe now for more investigations that demand answers.